Okay, so the the Welcome to Noxus cinematic, right? It's just released like yesterday, and we got a new look at a bunch of champions in the Arcane universe, in the Fortiche style as well, right? And one of those is Vladimir. And I figured, why don't we talk about the characters that were shown and what changes were made to them? So for this video, we're pretty much only going to talk about Vladimir specifically. Maybe I'll get into LeBlanc, but I want to talk about Vladimir first. And the reason I want to talk about Vladimir first is because I feel like Vladimir has been wronged. And I know this, to most people, this is probably not immediately noticeable, because Vladimir is a dandy, right? He is an extravagant, flamboyant, kind of weird guy. He's reminiscent of, I don't watch a lot of anime, but I remember watching Hunter x Hunter once. And there's one of the final chapters, there is a butterfly kind of villain. And if anyone knows who that is reminiscent of what I think about when I think of who Vladimir is, what kind of style and vibe he has. Like that's the type of personality Vladimir is down that route, right? He's not exactly the same. He's a lot darker in his personality, as far as I remember the butterfly one is, because I feel like he's a lot more, in some ways, motherly, and that's not what Vladimir is. He's just zesty. Zesty is a good word for Vladimir, right? So given these things, I figured, why don't we talk about him? Because I should have grabbed a picture of his entire outfit. We'll pull that up later. But I don't feel like this Vladimir manages that. So first of all, to talk about what actually happens in the music video, right? So at the end, Vladimir arrives at LeBlanc's side, and they talk about whatever the fuck they talk about, right? Whatever they plan next. And Vladimir gets concerned, and he doesn't know what LeBlanc is like. LeBlanc has to teach him what is happening, or show him in some way, which is out of character, because Vladimir and LeBlanc are both the founders of the Black Rose, and the members of the Black Rose should generally never be beneath each other. Sure, LeBlanc's the leader, whatever, but she's not necessarily the leader because of any normal circumstances. She's the leader because she keeps the others in check as well. That's the kind of vibe that LeBlanc has. And also because there's no reason to take leadership from her. It's just extra weight on the other members, right? If they decide that they want the power instead. They don't necessarily need it, right? There needs to be good reasons why the other members don't try to fight, or why they can't steal that spot from her. Because they are a bunch of backstabbing intellectuals that have this secret Illuminati shadow organization thing going on, right? Vladimir does not need to be taught and does not fear stuff. He doesn't fear stuff either. He's practically immortal. He doesn't fear stuff. There's one thing he's allowed to fear, and that's Mordekaiser, but whatever they were talking about isn't Mordekaiser, right? And the reason they should fear Mordekaiser is just generally because it gives him so much aura, you know? That's literally the reason why, and that's an important part of who Mordekaiser is. That is the fact that he just has the most aura of any fucking person, right? He's the most metal, he's the most badass. He is the maximum fucking cool score you can get, right? So what is Vladimir if he's not these things? Because his personality is also a little bit too downplayed, and his clothing is too downplayed. He's too restrictive in what he is. His hairstyle is also a little bit too downplayed. So if we take a look at what he's been thus far, this is the very first iteration of Vladimir. This is the concept art from, or at least the first one we are shown. It's the concept art from before he was released way back in the day, I believe in 2010 or 11. I think it was 10. Yeah, it must have been 2010. And very, very clearly, this comes out right out of Warcraft, which is where League of Legends took a bunch of inspiration from back in the day. But we can easily like see a lot of the things that Vladimir have retained today in this design already. I feel like obviously there have been a lot of changes, and to my knowledge, most of them have been really good. But this is the first iteration of Vladimir we're working with. So already, if we were shown this character right off the bat, like as the very first time we've seen the character since he looked like this would have been this, then we wouldn't have been able to see that they are the same character, right? We wouldn't have been able to recognize them in each other. Because we have the middle ground, which is OG Vladimir, right? We can sort of get the bridge between these two designs. But the important identity markers for this Vladimir comes from this Vladimir. And this Vladimir takes the new ones and gets rid of the old ones to a degree, which I don't like. And I think it's generally against what and who Vladimir is. So Vladimir is an aristocrat, and he's a very old, very dangerous sorcerer. I'm so sorry. He's a sorcerer, not a sorceress. He's a wizard, right? He's a dandy. He's like a flamboyant. He's a zesty. He's a very extravagant guy who's also still very sinister, right? He's a womanizer. And he is very hedonistic as well. So all of these words, yeah, if you look at this design specifically, sure. Like, genuinely, that fits. It fits in the picture of who Vladimir is. I know a lot of people think he looks terrible. I genuinely think that the majority of this design is actually quite good. I know that there are some people that have been saying that his pants are complete garbage. Even his pants are so silly that I don't even think they are that silly. Like, sure, it's like kind of weird. They look like pajamas to some degree, but I actually think it works for him. I think it works for him. His boots work for him. His long ass knife fingers, they work for him because it's not about using them practically. It's about the fact that it's fashion. The spikes on his what are they? Fucking his jacket cuffs, I guess. They are fashion, right? He has spikes on his back. That's fashion. His entire coat is fashion. I don't even know if we can call it a coat. Can we call it a coat? It's more like I suppose it's a coat. There are no other words for it. Jacket, whatever. It's extravagant. It stands out. When you look at this guy, you understand, okay, he is more than the regular person because the regular person's coat is more downplayed. He has a cowl because he's a Dracula, obviously. That's where he's taking a lot of inspiration from, right? He's kind of a warlock. He's a dark sorcerer, and sure, all of it fits. All of it fits in this picture of who Vladimir is. It fits really well together, right? So the issue is what if that remains here, right? What if that actually remains? Actually, I'll pull up the League of Legends client. It's just testing out some Swift play, but let's pull up Vladimir and see what's actually going on with him. Because that way we can also get the Mask of the Black Rose skin and take a look at that just briefly, right? So the original splash art for Vladimir, the original updated one, this one, right? It paints a really, really good picture of who Vladimir is. And it does so to the same degree that the Victor splash art painted a good picture of who he was. And the Victor splash art itself, literally the splash art, is also a big reason for why people even love the character, and by extension why they dislike the new one. And so if you're going to change Vladimir too much, or not necessarily too much, but if you're going to change the vibe and the feeling and the aesthetic of Vladimir too much, you risk hurting the character and what makes it really good. This is a very downplayed color scheme that I don't think Vladimir would normally wear. Now, the fact that he wears it on a one-off, that's completely fine. It's fine that he wears it on a one-off. Like, who cares? He has a wardrobe, for fuck's sake. It's fine, right? But what's troubling is that this is generally very downplayed to a point where it's realistic, and that's bad. Because they are not supposed to be that realistic. They aren't supposed to be that realistic. It's still fantasy for a reason. You can do crazy ass shit because it is fantasy. You know, each of the Black Rose members are supposed to look like they are extraordinary sorcerers and sorceresses with extreme power, intellectuals that can like scheme their way through stuff and have intricate plans. Just, you can't mess with them because they orchestrate the world. They are manipulators of the world. They are the shadow society. They are the hidden governors of the world, right? They make sure all of the stuff that happens, and they keep some of the very important, the stuff that they can't control, they keep in control, right? That's what they are supposed to do. So the fact that he looks normal here, or more normal, is it's just, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work for me. And I think if most people are given some time to just, how about this? If you were given 2 pictures, or just 2 different versions of a show, an Noxus show, right? Where you have this Vladimir and you have our Vladimir. Which one would you like more? And I would probably, honestly, I'd guarantee you that people would like something closer to this way more. Way more. I'm trying to think if there's an example in Arcane. Because Warwick would be the go-to example, right? And it doesn't... I actually like the Warwick design in Arcane. I think it suits the story, and I think it's really important what they did with him. I think that's... They are right in doing what they did with him for the most of the time. I do think that this Victor Wake thing it's a little bit off-putting, because Warwick is a champion already, and doing that to him is a little crazy, right? I do like that they decide to have the freedom to do this, and they just go ahead and do it. And had Warwick not existed already, this would have been cool too. This would have genuinely, like, the way that they went about it in Arcane would have been good if Warwick wasn't already a character by the end, right? The issue is that we don't really ever get this, which is a very big part of what Warwick really kind of is, right? And that's pretty destructive to the character, which is also part of why, even though Arcane Warwick is great and Arcane is generally great, it should be its own universe, and it should not be the main universe. To add to this, Victor, the new Victor is fucking amazing and 10 million times better designed than old Victor. However, old Victor obviously has the issues that his entire aesthetic and vibe and the feelings associated with him and his power source and all that stuff was taken away for something else. And that's the problem, right? This Victor is amazing. It's amazing. Truly amazing. And it's a better character than old Victor. By all standards. However, old Victor he had something that was really cool and unique in the roster of League of Legends. And in League of Legends itself, in the context of League, he was unique because there's nothing really like him. The closest you get is something like Urgot, Camille, and I kind of want to say... I kind of want to say Nautilus and Rumble to some degree as well. That's kind of like the direction you're going to go. They're probably someone else. There's some Malzahar about it, but you can't really tie them to like most of the characters that I mentioned, even though that's sort of like... And what I mean by that, because Nautilus is like a crazy example, right? But if you were to think about what Nautilus kind of is, like if you were to take the concept of what Victor is and then change, like just the way that he was made, and then go about the concept of what Nautilus is and the way that he's made, I'd say that this is a very abstract concept, but basically the process of creation behind how the characters are made is the same to me. And also aesthetically, they are kind of like similar in some ways. But I don't feel like I get that from, or rather, we don't get that from New Victor, right? Anyway. It's part of the problem behind Vladimir. So what should Vladimir actually look like, right? Because Wild Rift tried to update him. They gave him the... I don't know what it's called, but the thing on his chest, right, which is tied to his neck. It's kind of like a tie, I guess. And then they gave him some very Noxian aesthetics. Whenever it came to sharp shapes, they went Noxian about it. And when it comes to his claws, they reduced the amount of claws that he had. And they changed his hairstyle. Made him more of a pretty boy. Vladimir being a pretty boy is fine. That's suitable for the character. It makes sense and it's not an issue at all. Maybe like saying boy... Oh, I just spoiled the last slide. Oh well, you got to see my ugly drawing. But it's more of like a pretty man, right? It's... You kind of... I suppose he's still a boy. He's obviously an adult. But he's a pretty boy adult, right? Can't really call him a boy. Wild Rift tries to give him a much more anime hairstyle. And I don't think that works as well. I don't think this hairstyle is specifically the best that he's ever had either. Don't get me wrong. But I do feel like something along these lines is better than this. I don't feel like his hairstyle should be that wild. It can have this kind of shape, but it shouldn't be wild. It should be quite well kept, actually, in my opinion. Because he's extravagant and flamboyant and all this stuff, but he's not chaotic. He might seem chaotic in some of the way that he's acting, but he is not, right? He's a very orderly, very... How do you say? He's I want to say he's considerate, but that sounds stupid because considerate is used in like a sympathetic, empathetic kind of way. It's more that he thinks a lot about stuff, right? And it's not that chaotic people can't do that, but it just doesn't feel like what he would dress like. It's not even only that he's chaotic, it's also just his age and all stuff going around him, right? He's an aristocrat. You know, chaotic hair doesn't really suit him. And as I said, they reduced the amount of claws he has, like the cosmetic claws thing. I don't know if I agree with that either. Like, practically, obviously, the claws are, like, extremely stupid. I suppose to a degree you would be... No, actually, he can use his fingers normally. Yeah, it shouldn't be that big of an issue. And even if he couldn't, it'd still be so cool that you'd have to go with the flow anyway, I feel. But it's basically jewelry for him, right? So it doesn't really feel that good or make that much sense to take it away from him. Also, the other thing about him is, even though he's a Noxian, the Noxian aesthetic doesn't actually suit him as much as it does with a lot of other characters. And it doesn't suit him in a way that the sharp metal, or rather just generally the sharp language that he has, shouldn't be noxusified or whatever. Noxusified, that's a stupid term. Just because it doesn't suit him. This blocky aesthetic does not suit him. Like, Noxus is more than just a blocky aesthetic. Even though the majority of it is that way, all of it doesn't have to be that way, right? In real life, cities are complicated. You have different places that look different, and you have different companies that make different stuff. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense to change for Vladimir in that direction. I think the sharper designs fit him better. The more spiky designs, right? Rather than this blocky stuff that he has. So, the reason I made this very ugly drawing is because I wanted to figure out what is my interpretation of Vladimir. Who is he to me? And I sort of just drew him based on how I see Vladimir, right? Normally I would have done this from memory, but I just had all of like the drawings up already. And as you can see, it's basically just base Vladimir from how he is in the game. And the one we get in Arcane is not really the one he is in game. And that's a shame, because the game Vladimir is really the one that shows him the best, I think. And now I want to show you something. I want to show you this, that Anthony's son made. It's a concept for Vladimir visual rework. Visual and gameplay, but we're going to focus on the visual part. It was made quite a few years ago. 5 years ago, right? So it's pretty old now, but it's really well done, and there are a lot of aspects that I think he managed to make work really well. So to start off, we obviously have the finished concept right here, right? And it keeps a lot of what makes Vladimir the same, which is really good and really important. Vladimir is the type of character that would not decide to not wear a shirt underneath his jacket, right? He is the type of character to decide to not do that. He is still an aristocrat, and he is still like a powerful sorcerer and all that stuff, but he's also hedonistic, and he is also flamboyant and all these kind of stuff like zesty and all that stuff, which does suit with not having his shirt on. another thing that we can take a look at right away is also the fact that he's holding a grail with dark magic in it, and that suits perfectly. I mean, once again, he's an aristocrat. Of course, he's the type of character that would drink wine, right? And his power is blood magic, and blood and wine. I mean, yeah, that's like a perfect comparison, right? So to have him, you know how wizards and sorcerers, they usually have some kind of means to channel their magic, right? They have an object to channel their magic through. A grail like this for Vladimir fits really, really well. However, I do have one issue with the grail. We'll get into some of the other stuff later. But one issue I have with the grail is actually that, remember how I said that Vladimir does not suit him. It does not suit him to have this very blocky Noxian aesthetic. That doesn't suit him. So we shouldn't have a blocky grail. Instead, we should have a Noxian wine glass. A wine glass that has some of the aesthetic of Noxus. It can have some blockiness, but Vladimir is not about that. Vladimir isn't about the big, strong, hard shapes of Noxus. He's not about that part of Noxus. So he wouldn't be carrying a grail like this around. He would have a real... He would have a glass. He would have a wine glass. That's much more who he is. So that's the first change I would make to this. The second one is the fact that, well, Vladimir is very much about jewelry. And sure, he has some chains, but doesn't really feel like this is what Vladimir would wear. I also feel like the symbol on his chest could be taken away. I don't think it's very memorable. I don't think it's much more also just because Vladimir doesn't need it. He doesn't need this specific thing. It's kind of cool that he has some kind of blood tattoo, but there are so many characters where tattoos are like one of the main ways that they show off their magic. I don't think Vladimir should be one of them. Instead, what I would do for Vladimir is that I would take a map of the arteries in the body and like a map of the blood system in the body and have that be its own jewelry on his chest. First of all, the first thing it would do is that it would mimic sort of the straps that he has going across his chest or his jacket, right? It would mimic that. And the second thing is, which is obvious, a lot more obvious, he's blood related. So just have the it's called, what is it? It's called blood system, cardiovascular system. Obvious, yeah, that's the word. Completely forgot. But to have him have the cardiovascular system as a jewelry piece on his chest, it just feels like it suits who Vladimir is as a person to have that kind of jewelry on his chest, and to have it be the blood system is just perfect. It's very in character, right? I would personally keep his claws and make his hair a little bit shorter and keep the vibrant red of his clothes. I think this is a little too dark and serious in how he dresses. I think he needs a bit more of that very, very bright red. A bit more of that extravagance. And a bit shorter hair, right? Because in reality, this is not bad. It just needs to be like a middle piece between this and this, right? And I feel like this is too long. If you made it shorter, maybe it would be a lot better because it'd be much closer to what I just expressed, or rather told that would be good, right? But I feel like this is a little too long. Right, so let's take a look at the other concept. This is a generally very well made by Anthony Sun, by the way. So I would heavily advise to, I don't know, follow his stuff or something like this, right? Really good design. So he is exploring a bunch of different ways to realize what Vladimir really is, right? He's trying something along the ways of how he uses his blood magic, how his clothes look. He's trying to do something along the lines of archery related clothing. You can see it in the coat he has here, and in the on the inside of his coat here, that it's sort of like, it's not, this is specifically not arteries, but it's adjacent to what arteries look like, right? So that suits Vladimir pretty well. I do feel like I'm happy he didn't go with this, because having his clothes be ruined to show this kind of archery stuff doesn't really work for Vlad. Then we go to Mist Drinker stuff, and this is more of like the aesthetic of what his abilities really do. And what Anthony Sun ends up doing is tying him to animals, specifically butterflies and moths, right? But we'll talk a little bit more about that later, I think. So he's using some keywords to try and figure out, well, what directions can Vladimir actually go, right? So Battle Mage and Blood Mage. This is the concept here. That is his role, and that is his power source, right? That he's a Blood Mage. That is what he is, and in-game he's a Battle Mage. So how do we show that? Well, Battle Mage is by giving him some armor that is still, keep a small silhouette, but give him armor, right? It's a really good way of doing it, and it's the best way of showing that off, right? It does end up going against who Vladimir is normally, because Vladimir doesn't really go to battle. And if Vladimir were to go to battle, this would probably be realistic, right? He would keep his style, but he would probably wear some armor. Even if he is immortal, I don't think it's out of character for him to have some kind of blood-powered armor, right? Kind of like Blood Lord Vladimir. That would make perfect sense. So this is all good. Although I don't think Vladimir should look like this. I think he should keep his aristocrat look. Also, the kind of allegiance design to Noxus is out of Vladimir territory. That is very much Swain territory, and it is not so much Vladimir. Then we have the idea of Vladimir as a swarm lord, where his design takes on a bit more of a butterfly or moth aesthetic, and his power source, while still being specifically blood magic, he takes the imagery of having butterflies / moths give him the blood, right? They are the ones that deliver the blood that he steals from people to him. Makes a lot of good sense. I really like this idea. Butterflies there are a specific type of butterflies that is specifically known for drinking blood. And also it's adjacent to bats and how bats kind of work in like a Dracula sense. So you take Dracula, you make him much more, these terms I've used, right? Flamboyant and all these kind of words, right? You make him more like that, and sure, he's a butterfly. Sure, it's perfect for him. His personality fits really well with a butterfly. It's like the Hunter x Hunter villain that I spoke about, right? fits really well with him. And also, he changes every 100 years. I don't remember how often it is. It's probably more than 100 years. But he changes how he looks. He leaves whenever something big is about to happen, and he returns anew with a different look, right? And that's very much Butterfly, because Butterfly is a symbol of transformation and change because of their cocoons, right? Fits really well, making his cloak, his jacket, more mothy in the way that you can also see this in the final concept, that it has more layers that are reminiscent of wings. That suits him really well, and I really like that. I think that's really good. And having his blood be delivered to him by a swarm of butterflies is such a cool idea. The only thing that I dislike about that specifically is that it intrudes on Cassiopeia, and it also intrudes on Elise, because we get into the part where it comes, well, how many champions do we have that actually have a power source that is not reliant on, but related to animals? Because animals animal stuff is a very popular way of depicting certain powers and characters, because, well, it's just really good design. We could have a long talk about that, but I'm deciding against it because I already talked too much. But generally, animal designs make a lot of sense, and often they're extremely cool, and they work perfectly when you try to make a character that is a specific way, to take personality traits from these animals, right? Even though it works for Vladimir in so many ways, I feel like it's dangerous to tie too many animals to champions, because it becomes an oversaturation of a specific thing. The same way that old Victor wasn't an oversaturation, and new Victor might be an oversaturation to some people, or rather is an oversaturation to some people, because he intrudes on some other champions, right? That is something that we would like to avoid. That is also a part of why this doesn't really work as well as this does. Because he is intruding on very basic stuff. He doesn't stand out. He's not expressing his identity. He's doing something else, right? That said, I don't think it's impossible to include these butterflies. I still think it's a great idea, and it works for him. The only question is whether or not it should be included because of oversaturation of animal-related design. Thematic keywords: Butterfly, Lich, Ancient, Blood Mage, Warlock. Archetypes: Battle Mage, Aristocrat, Vampire. Went about it perfectly in general. It's just really, really good. Lich, that is what he is. It's great to explore that. Obviously, this is not the Vladimir we know, but it's a very interesting idea, and I'm glad that Anthony takes the freedom to actually explore these kinds of stuff, these kinds of designs, right? I know Riot also does that themselves. They also do explore, what if we made very big changes? Is there something to actually get to here, right? You might remember that from Handmundo back when he was reworked. So it's a great idea to try and actually pursue some of these designs sometimes. For Vladimir, it doesn't really work, right? And that's also presumably why Anthony didn't continue with it. Aristocrat, Vampire. He is a vampire, even though he's a blood mage and not specifically a vampire. That is what he's supposed to be, right? That is the aesthetic and the concept that he's building upon. And once again, the battle mage thing about the armor, I talked about that earlier. Ancient, Warlock, Butterfly. So he's going to continue with the Butterfly, as we also see in the final design, which I still think is good. It's good design. Only question is whether or not it should be implemented because of oversaturation. Right, and some more exploration of the butterfly idea, which is really cool. It becomes so cool. The further down we get, it becomes much, much cooler. Crimson Harvest, this is his... yeah, well, I'm not gonna go into the spells and stuff like that right now. I don't, if at all, right? I'm not gonna go do that, but we will take a look at the art. So my thought about whenever he steals blood like this, first of all, the way that it looks in-game right now is actually very, very... It feels a lot like you're actually stealing blood. I don't think this feels like you're stealing blood. I don't know how Riot would do it if they ever were to visually rework him, because of when they are to. Because obviously there's a lot of censorship around blood and stuff like that. So maybe he would have something similar to this instead. I do think he should keep the feel of him actually stealing blood. Also, if you were to make it different, having the butterflies deliver the blood to him, like sending out some dark magic and then having the blood come back in shapes of butterflies, that'd be really cool. You could also do that with real blood, by the way. You would still have real, or rather, the blood return as butterflies and have like butterflies made of blood fly back to him out of the skin of his enemies. That'd still be fucking dope. So just generally really good ideas. W, swarm form thing. Right, so this can never not be a pool. Even though I think this idea is fucking awesome, it can't not be a pool. Unfortunately. Because this is so dope. Having him fly around with these, like, you can see that the wings would be beating very, very quickly. His hair, his jacket, both the cowl and the bottom of the jacket would be acting as the wings, all of it. And it would just, like, fly very, very rapidly across the field. Looks awesome. But it wouldn't work because it's very important to Vladimir that he becomes a pool. It's a very important part of his identity. No matter how well designed this is, because even like the way the hair is the only part of him that remains, and as an identity marker, it's just perfect. But because he has existed for so long, and because the pool is such a deep part of him, we can't really do anything about that. Going to ignore this because this is a completely new spell, and I also don't have much to say about it. Okay, so fake Darken Ascension. That's really cool. That's a cool idea. Having Vladimir have a transformation ultimate is a little too much like Swain. And even though this down here is so dope, this is so cool, this is so epic. Even if it doesn't have the, I don't know what the spell actually does, but even if it didn't have the AoE effect, it still wouldn't work because of Swain. I don't know how you would, because this is so cool. This is so cool. Like the structure of the butterfly wings being also adjacent to veins and arteries is so dope too. That's so good. It's so good. But you just can't do it because of Swain. And even if Swain didn't have this, I still think that it intrudes too much on him, on Swain specifically, when it comes to the lore. And it also gives Vladimir too much. Because when you look at Swain, right? Swain is an amazing design. He's really, really well done. But when it comes to high fantasy, Swain isn't an 11 out of 10. He is a fantasy character, but he's not high fantasy, extreme, super, like, he's not extremely elaborate, right? He doesn't have to be. This works perfectly for him. This is really, really good. But the powerful moment that he does have is his magic, right? That's what makes him really high in fantasy in the end. And one of these things is his ultimate. I do feel like his ultimate is a little bit underplayed. But if you are to take that and have a character who by itself is a lot more high fantasy already, or at least you can make the base version of Vladimir a lot more high fantasy as a base design, then doing this is a little bit overkill, because you go beyond what Swain is allowed to have. You actually enter 11 out of 10 mode, and usually you'd think that's a good idea, but it hurts other characters that he's around if he becomes too elaborate, right? So what do I think we need Vladimir to have if we are to make a summary about it? Anthony Sun's final design has most of the stuff that I would want from Vladimir. The only things I would change is his chest piece, have it be the jewelry. I would change his hair to be a little bit shorter. Or a bit shorter maybe, right? But just generally try to find a hairstyle that works well for him. Have less Noxian, blocky and rough aesthetic about it. Give him a wine glass instead of a grail. Give him his claws back and a lot of like the jewelry that makes him look a little bit stupid sometimes. But have a lot of this back and just make it look good, right? Have these knives be there because it's fashion. That is who he is. He's a fashionista, is specifically female, is a female word, I think. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't actually know. But anyway, he would be a fashionista, or the male version of that, right? A fashionist. There we go. That's pretty simple. A fashionist. You'd be a fashionist. Yeah, what else? I generally think that Vladimir's base design is actually really, really good. And it is the things that make it bad make him really, really, makes him stand out and be really ugly. But if you just fix those, like, you don't have to do as much as you would with most other characters. And by the way, I'm not gonna like glaze myself, but this is a lot coming from me, because I believe that most characters would need massive changes if most like not well designed characters need massive changes. Something like, let's talk about LeBlanc briefly. Something like LeBlanc would need massive changes to actually be a well designed character. And guess who I have here? I have the new LeBlanc. A new LeBlanc from this screenshot when we saw in the cinematic. It's pretty good already. Pretty good. Still a little bit downplayed, but she's generally pretty good. Then we get to see her in-game, and she's perfect. She's absolutely perfect. Everything is pretty much going for her. I think the only thing that's a little bit off is her hairstyle, but because that was like the bob she had was really iconic. But it's fine giving her a new hairstyle. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage. Maybe have her hands and arms be a little bit more Moira from Overwatch, or a little more Scarlet Witch from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the way that's depicted. Have it be a little bit more witch-like and monstrous. I would have liked that personally, just like the tips maybe. But other than that, it's just good. It's all around just really good. Also, like, remember how I previously mentioned that I think the crown of her dress should be shaped like the bud, or at least a rose, right? Because that's something you can do with the design. We've seen it in Renata's recent black mask, a black rose skin, right? But I think that should be for LeBlanc. Instead, what they decided to do is make the cowl the one that imitates the rose, which is an amazing idea. They've also given her the jewelry on the chest, which is also a rose, and also her staff is the rose. Generally, she looks like the leader. Also because they decided to rework her yellow and gold aesthetics into the new design in a very, very interesting way. Like, sure, it's present in the old one, but in the new one, they've made it so that she seems regal, right? It gives her the sense that she is the leader, she's the queen because she's wearing the gold, right? And that's really good. I was also thinking about something else. So with the new design, they also changed the headpiece into actually being very reminiscent of a mafia matriarch, which is, that's what she is, right? Really, really good design. Really good design. Very happy about the new LeBlanc. She's so good in so many ways. And this is where we sort of come back to Vladimir, right? So she looks very elaborate now. She looks very elaborate. The only thing that's really missing is that her arms should probably be a bit more monstrous, just to show off that she is a very dark character, like to a point where it's like not fun anymore, right? To a point where it's disgustingly dark. I think that she should have that as a character. It's unappealing to a lot of people, and it sort of goes against who they see LeBlanc as, because to a lot of people she's more of a fashion statement in many ways. And this, while the fashion statement is very much retained here, giving her like sort of very ghoulish arms would go against what they want. And that's why she doesn't have it, I presume. But I think it would work really well for her. Vladimir is very much the same area of extravagance in his base design. But in the new one, he's just fallen off, right? And LeBlanc in the show, she's downplayed. She's very downplayed compared to the design that she's going to get in League of Legends. However, this is what we need to compare to when it comes to Vladimir, because that is basically the intention behind this is making it this version of Vlad. But this and this is still not the same. It's not really, I don't feel like you get the sense that, oh yeah, sure, that's the outfit I'm looking at here. That is the same character. He doesn't need any more than this. I get the sense of I get the sense that this is Vladimir 1-to-1. While you do get the sense that this is LeBlanc, even if it is downplayed, right? Even if she does look like this, you do get the sense that it's LeBlanc. And I feel like that is bad. It's not only a missed opportunity, but it directly hurts the character, which is really sad because he's an extremely cool character. Also, the way that he speaks, I mentioned I would go over it, so let's just do that really quickly. Vladimir quotes. I actually have him open here, I think. Yeah. Where do I go? It must be like... okay, sure. We'll do the audio of League, and then we'll do the audio of Legends of Runeterra, right? Can you hear this, by the way? I'll just make sure you can hear this. I don't think you can. Okay, I'll just fix that real quick. This is so annoying. Opera GX, you gotta do a little bit better.
Wonderful.
There we go. Okay, so there are his voice lines, right?
My cup is half empty. The clot thickens. feelings. Please, let it all out. Let's pool our efforts. I'm absolutely livid. Trickling progress. A harvest moon. So aptly named. A vital decision. I've got you. Under my skin.
And he's got a few more, right, that are pretty good. The thing is, the voice is very outdated, right? It's old and it's outdated. However, the bass lines of this voice and what he's saying and all that stuff is actually really, really good. Like, they have the character of Vladimir down, the voice is just a little bit off, right? So what they did in Legends of Runeterra is they did something about it.
I'd never keep my guests waiting. Hello, my darlings. I've dressed for the occasion in red. Who's for supper?
This character is so dope. He's so cool.
Delicious. I'm absolutely parched. Let's see what they're made of. Where can I find a full-bodied red? Who would dance with me? Yes.
Even that, like that's the horniest, most hedonistic yes you've ever heard.
Yes.
That's exactly who he is.
Flow. Bottoms up.
Bottoms up. I can't do that, right?
This one's mine.
But it's so
Such a
good.
pretty thing. I assume you've come for me. Gaze upon me.
Gaze upon me.
My sweet little plaything.
And I can't even land the bare minimum of this.
Gaze upon me.
Because it's just so well done. And I don't feel like we get that. Not that the voice actor is bad at all. That's not the case. It's the case of how Vladimir is written in the cinematic, right? I don't get this Vladimir that we all know and love from this character. Even if they're... And that's the thing, right? Because a lot of people are really going to love to see Vladimir. Oh my god, it's Vladimir. Yeah, oh my god, this is awesome. But I feel like people haven't yet come to realize, or at least get the sense of who this character is, because the changes aren't immediately noticeable. But once you pay attention to them, you very quickly realize, even though it's a small clip that we've seen thus far, this isn't really the same character. This isn't what we've grown to love. It's actually quite different. And while there's some things that are really good about him, like he says darling, which is very Vladimir, but the way that he acts and his, like, how he feels and thinks, that wasn't really Vladimir. How he looks, I mean, oh my god, we can see that it's Vladimir. He has some of, like, the main features of Vladimir. But when you look closer at him, it's like, wait a second. That isn't really Vladimir. His face is that's very good. His face is good. His face is good. Kind of looks like he's got a little bit of a plastic surgery situation going on, which is very fitting for him. Also pretty boyish, even while he's having a unique face where he's not just the perfect, pop culture, whatever depiction of a face, highly stylized. It's unique and it's good, right? So that's my rant on Vladimir. I hope they do something about him. I don't think they will, especially if they don't see my video. If they do, obviously they would. No, I'm kidding. But I do feel like these are some very solid criticisms of Vladimir, and I hope that you agree. Please, if you have any thoughts about him, do let me know, right? I could talk about this all day, honestly. So, actually, I'll continue a little bit, but do know that the video is pretty much probably over here. I don't think I'm going to go into something, any new concepts right now, right? But to continue a little bit, the color scheme of him needs to be very vibrant. It needs to be vibrant. That's another issue that I had with Anthony Sun's design, is that it just wasn't as vibrant, right? And then also his claws, right? They aren't tied to the rest of his hand, so it's basically rings. You know, these are like products you can actually buy. Obviously, they aren't that long, but real versions of these things do exist to some degree, and he can functionally use his fingers theoretically. You just gotta, you know, make sure that he can sort of move them correctly with his claws. That's kind of difficult, but suspension of belief can easily fix that. However, if they are that big, you kind of got to make sure that they are actually tied to your hand. So probably have some kind of extra jewelry that'll actually tie the claws to his wrist so that he can actually hold on to them effectively, right? I feel like that would probably be a pretty good idea. Other than that, I would love to talk about some of the other characters that show up. I can already spoil now which ones they are, so... Oh, right, I also meant to talk about this. You know what, we'll just jump right into LeBlanc and finish it off with that, right? But at some point, I want to talk about how Elise is made. I want to talk about how Trundle is made. I want to talk about Darius, and I want to talk about some of the arcane ones at some point, and all of the other characters. Generally, the entire universe, right? But to finish off with LeBlanc, a lot of people wanted this to be LeBlanc. The version we had in Legends of Runeterra. And remember how earlier I mentioned how most characters need massive changes to actually really be extraordinary. To truly be extraordinary, they would need a lot of changes. And something I've always been annoyed by when Legends of Runeterra makes updates is that people will suck it up no matter what it is. They'll just drop on all four and they'll just start praying, and they'll if they sip it up like it's sugar and alcohol. Okay, it's crazy. This LeBlanc is not by any means bad. She can't fall into the category of bad. This one does, this one doesn't. This is bad, this one is not. But this one is not extraordinary, and that's important to know and realize, right? This is not extraordinary. The headpiece, sure, that's like a part of the Noxian crest. And sure, it makes sense for her if she were to be part of the Noxian crest in any way, or like not she's not going to be a part of it because that's the Triferix, right? But if she were to take any inspiration from it to show that she's also a leader of Noxus in some way, having the golden design is perfect. And why is it also perfect? Because which helmet does it depict to? Which character does it remind you of if you like try to think about it? Oh yeah, that's Mordekaiser's head, right? That's Mordekaiser's helmet. So she's taking over from Mordekaiser. She knew Mordekaiser. She betrayed him. So she's taking sort of some inspiration from him. And I really like that. However, I don't think it suits her. Actually, now that I just said this, I'm actually shooting myself in the foot a little bit because I think that's a really cool idea. And I kind of really want it. Fuck. Oh god, okay. Well, that's... Oh my fucking... Okay, wait, you know what? I'll justify it by saying her staff looks like Nightfall. So she still got the Mordekaiser thing going on. It's fine. Oh my god, I shouldn't have analyzed it. Fuck. Okay, it's whatever. Jesus Christ. Whatever. If she ever were to have some kind of crown like this, I wouldn't mind anymore. I just think it looks dumb on first look, right? Anyway, the rest of her design is very downplayed. Like, you have to keep in mind, it's not an updated look necessarily, or rather it is, but it's more of like a modernization of LeBlanc. It's not an updated look as much as it is a modernization. And she needs more than that. This doesn't work. Even if, like, you can't change the fundamental stuff about her. She's going to be a woman, she's going to be pretty hot, she's going to be a magician to some degree. That is what you get. But you get her as what she actually is. And that's great, because that is what we want. Right, that's it for this video. I'm not gonna do any more with this one. Katarina's fucking hot. Really, really nice. Elise's fucking hot. Oh, it's maybe a little bit creepy, but it's really cool. Trundle is fucking hot. Darius looks stupid. Trundle looks fucking cool. The only thing I don't like about Trundle is the fact that he doesn't have like you know how Trundle has like these kind of molds made out of bone? So he has like these dark spikes of bone on him, and the trolls generally have that. I think that's an important part for the character and the race that I don't think they should remove. So I'm missing that here. We all agree on the fact that Trundle should probably just fucking one-shot Darius in any setting. So that's a little bit. But other than that, I don't mind that they reduced their size a little bit. I think that's fine, actually. I think it works for the trolls to not be as big as they were. But I also wouldn't mind if they were their original size. They can be both, right? It's just up to interpretation. I think both work. And I think we need to be honest with ourselves, because I genuinely think most people wouldn't mind as long as they get real Trundle. And this is basically real Trundle. It's almost as close as you get. The only differences are the nose, the size, and the fact that he doesn't have the frozen, or not the frozen, but like the bone molds on him. But generally, other than that, he's still a really, really good design. And they made some really cool changes to him too. Darius, armor looks terrible. He's obviously a younger version. I think his hairstyle is ugly, but I think it works for him. And I think it's cool. I think his young look is kind of a little bit weird. It's a little bit weird to see him young, because he genuinely looks like a young human. Normally, younger Darius would be something like 2xKO. A 2xKO Darius is still supposed to be old Darius, but he looks like what young Darius is, right? Let me just give you an example here. Yeah, we can pull this up. Am I leaking anything? I don't think I am. No, I wouldn't, right? I'm leaking my face as a baby. Perfect. That's fine. So this is Darius in 2xKO. He is supposed to be old, but as soon as you go in-game, he's not old, right? He's a highly stylized, good-looking guy, right? But he is supposed to be older. But this is an actual young Darius, which is very interesting. Armor looks ugly. Trifarian Legion doesn't look like Trifarian Legion. They just look like all of them are the same soldier. But that's whatever. They save a lot of time by doing this, right? For the show, hopefully they do actual Trifarian stuff where each of them are pretty unique. And then when it comes to his axe is also fucking ugly in general. So I'm happy that they destroyed it, because most likely what they're going to do is give him a new axe. And hopefully, because they also fucked up his arm, I hope that my Darius design is going to make somewhat of an appearance in some way. I know that sounds stupid, like why would it, right? Basically, one of the ideas that I had a lot of ideas, and I'll explore Darius some other time. But one of the ideas I had was to give him an iron fist, because he is, well, because he's ruling with an iron fist, right? So it does a lot of stuff by giving him a prosthetic that is an Iron Fist. First of all, it proves that he's been in battle and he has been battle damaged, right? So it's a scar that he's a warrior, and it is a scar that shows that he's strong because he survived it. It ties into how he rules because he rules with an Iron Fist, right? That would make a lot of that's a good comparison. And also it ties him to Swain because Swain also is missing an arm. Darius is now missing a hand, right? So I think there's a lot of stuff that could be improved upon with Darius, and I hope that they choose to do that because that is really cool. In terms of his axe, I think they should just give him the 2x scale axe. It's much better version of the axe he actually has. It still keeps some of the same design decisions about the axe, but the 2x KO version just looks and feels so much better. Right, that's it for this video. I dragged it out to 1 hour and 10 minutes. Thank you for listening.